Voices of the Grand Canyon. So I'd like to welcome Deidra Peaches to the floor. Welcome, Deidra. And we also understand that we have a guest. Would you like to introduce your guest, please?
Yes, I would like to introduce Serrano Riggs, who's also Dene.
Thank you so much for being here, Deidra and Serrana. I know this is a big deal because you guys have just premiered or are about to premiere Voices of the Grand Canyon. So thank you for telling your story. Again, Deidra is a Dene filmmaker, born and raised in Flagstaff, Arizona. So welcome and thank you for your wonderful work. And you know, I kind of wanted to begin by asking you how you're feeling. You know, how are you feeling and getting ready to premiere Voices of the Grand Canyon?
Kia Yat Ash A Deidra Peaches Inishia, Torichi Inishlin, Logadina Bashashin, Ashihan Dashache, Torichi Dashanele, Kinsanid Holieta Nashas. As a Dene woman, I want to give representation on the land that I'm currently a guest in, which is off the land. And to my relatives in this area, thank you for allowing me to be here. What else did you want me to say? Sorry.
How are you feeling about premiering Voices of the Grand Canyon?
I'm feeling pretty excited. It's really important to have these conversations, and Voices of the Grand Canyon is definitely a documentary that promotes having conversations with not just one indigenous tribe, but multiple tribes. We have 5 tribes that are represented in the documentary. And I feel that as indigenous people, we need to have these conversations where we're able to share in spaces where in our art and what we do, what it is and who we are. And I think that as a Dene person, I wish I could speak to you in my language, but unfortunately colonization has had its many, has had an onslaught, especially onto this community and to all the communities that are residing in the area. So I feel that it's really important to realize the historical context in which we stand upon and how the power that we're allotted is powers from our ancestors and from all the living beings that surround us. And it's important to give them recognition too, especially in a city where that severed, there's a severed connection with the land, there's a severed connection with the water especially. We have the CAP that diverts water from the Colorado River. And what is that harmony? What is that balance? If you don't have balance, then what is that? So I think it's really important to have those conversations, and thank you, yeah.
And how about for you, Serrana, being part of these conversations, being featured?
Yeah, hi. I'll just introduce myself. Serrana Riggs, I'm from the Navajo Nation, Chishu Dene, Nishla, so I'm Cherokee Apache. Lizaflane, which is Minigos clan, Ashidi, which is Salt clan, and Tonajidi, which is Bitterwater clan. I grew up in the Big Mountain area, so I know a lot of issues regarding the Peabody coal mine. But yeah, the question that you asked is that the conversation started initially with a group of individuals from that was formed after the centennial of the Grand Canyon National Park. And in the eyes of the national park, they looked at it like, this is, what are we celebrating after 100 years? And for indigenous people, we didn't look at it as a celebration. We looked at it as something else because the park came in and it forced and removed people off of their lands, and it basically chased off everybody. And there's 11 tribes plus associated with the Grand Canyon. And so once these boundaries came up, it was, things changed, and it removed everybody from natural spaces and places that they're used to, like hunting or all the other things that we as indigenous people do, and also prayer places. So with a group of people from various tribes, Zuni, Navajo, Hopi, Havasupai, Wallapai, just naming a few, but we asked them, what is your thoughts on it? And everybody said, well, no, because I was forced away from here, and there's these things happening. And for some residents on the rim of the Grand Canyon, they were saying, we just got done with Escalade and some development that was supposed to be proposed, and there's all sorts of things that they had a deep topic about. And so after that conversation, we said, well, what do you want to see for the next 100 years? And they're like, no, we don't want to look at it as just the next 100 years. Let's first address what happened in the past 100 years, and let's reflect on that, and we need to heal from it, and how do we heal from that? And so we had this intense dialogue, and then it moved forward from there, recognizing all of us that have this historical trauma, and how do we go forward? And so after acknowledging that within the group, they had talked more in depth about what the future could look like for future generations, way down the road. Thinking beyond, like for myself, thinking like, well, if I'm gone, then what am I leaving behind? So that was everybody's perception. And so in that, the focus became just initially on talking about stewardship, management, education. How do we talk about ourselves in a way we're not being the stereotypical Indian or the Hollywood Indian, and how do we portray ourselves in a direct, true manner, but not also sell our culture and identity. What is it how do we portray that? And then we also talked about economy and not capitalizing on ourselves and our culture and our beliefs and our traditions, and what does that look like? So with working on everybody's voices, this story was talked about and how to portray that, and who was going to be part of these voices of the Grand Canyon. And so we started working on that, and we're getting those voices collected. And I'm really appreciative of the work that Deidra has done, because she's portrayed a lot of issues that have happened on indigenous lands. And I really respect the work that she does.
So Deidra, what did it mean for you to be listening to these stories and learn, from your people, the feelings and going over the trauma that has happened over the past 100 years? But what does it mean to you to be able to tell the story? Because you directed the film, you had the opportunity to create this. So what does that mean for you, now that you're telling this story?
I just want to give also a shout out to Sarana, because I respect all the work that she's done with all the work around the water and everything. And I think when it comes to these stories, I feel like we survived the apocalypse. Like, I feel like as indigenous people, like, we went through this very traumatic time that a lot of us still haven't reconciled within ourselves, that there needs to be healing done first and foremost. And that's where storytelling comes in. That's where you're able to give voice, you're able to, and that's where art comes in. Because you're able to transform what it is that may be negative, what it is that's impacting you, into something that's beautiful. And anytime I make a film, like, I feel that I pour my heart into it. I pour my soul into it. Like, every film is like a kid of mine. Like, that's how I look at it. Like, I'm putting everything in my soul on that screen. And I don't want to sell myself short in any of that. And I give just recognition to the authenticity of the voices that are being portrayed, because traditionally, as Diné people, we're not even supposed to be in front of a camera. Like we're not even supposed to be seen on camera, because that camera was like taking my soul right now. And so I think there's like very like truthful teachings that we have in our culture that we can either choose to hold respect to it or not. And so there's a very tipping point in our societies, even too among Indigenous people, of like, are you going to use your culture and create profit? And like, what is that? That's like bad medicine. Like, that's how I see it. And I think it's important to like recognize like, whenever you're in front of a camera, whenever you're having a story with someone, like that they're sharing something with you. They're sharing the most, they may have told you a story that they haven't shared to their closest family member. And that's something that's really sacred. And it shouldn't be sold for anything less. And I feel that even in this day and age, that there just needs to be more respect and historical acknowledgement of what it is. Like, are we fighting to perpetuate capitalism? Or are we dismantling those systems that have been instituted that are Eurocentric, that are Western ideals? Like, those are like, for me to make money off of like, making something that nature has provided. Like, money is a weird concept. It was something that's been Western. It's something that, in Diné, you say peso. And it's based after peso, which is a Spanish colonial term. And so how do we dismantle colonialism as far as like the way we think? And I think that's really important is like, every day, like as an artist, like what are you making this art for? Like, are you making it for yourself or are you making it so you could sell it to someone else? And so I think those are some questions to definitely propose and to think about.
And for other Diné filmmakers or other Indigenous filmmakers who maybe struggle with that question, right? That question that you just posed, what would you tell them?
First off, listen. And I feel that when you're in ceremony, when you're in places of spirituality, when you don't talk, right? You listen. You're there in that presence. And I think like for a lot of young filmmakers and young artists, that there's a lot of listening that needs to happen, but then there's also too a lot of internal questions that need to be, that you need to propose to yourself, like, what am I doing this, and what am I doing it for? And those are all like relevant questions, and I think that that's something that any artist should definitely keep in mind when they create art. Because you're putting that medicine out there through your work. Like when another film that I made, which was Alaska documentary, they created paddles, they carved paddles, and whenever a paddle would break, they would say, well, that there wasn't good thoughts put into it. There wasn't, if there was good intention put behind it, then it would last. And I think that's something to think about when you create art, when you create anything, is that what's the intention behind it?
And during the filming of Voices of the Grand Canyon, with all of those factors, what was the biggest challenge for you and for everybody else who was part of the film?
For me, the biggest challenge is listening to the stories and trying to pick out the particular sections that I feel that will speak the loudest out of it, so to selectively pick. And I think in this documentary, the hardest part was when Lee talks about when spirits in Hopi, when people die, they go to the Sipapuni. And when their spirits go there, they come out as clouds. And I think like in those teachings, in that, and hearing it, there's hope, and it creates a relationship with me and nature. With seeing clouds, knowing they create moisture, they bring water. And what is my connection to it? And I think like the respect and reverence that I have as an artist to the elements is something that I was able to get from the interviews was that it just strengthens my connection is just so much more powerful to the land because I'm giving it that respect. And I think like by acknowledging it and living it and in putting that into your life as far as what respect you give to everything around, like that's something like hearing those words and the beautiful elegance of how each of these individuals in the documentary, like they come from so much places that, and people that have gone through, like they've gone through death, they've gone through their own apocalypse, and this is the remnants that we have. And it's what we have to hold dear is their voices and what it is they stand for.
How about for you, Sarana?
Yeah, I was just thinking of it overall, and Deidra portrayed like, I guess, everything that had to go with the film. But I also, in my mind, as we were going, trying to put this together, I think the only thing that kind of stopped us in the beginning was just the pandemic that we just went into, and of course the severity of the issue, especially on indigenous lands, and and of course like protecting our elders and wanting to hear the story and how to share that story, but of course being very respectful. And I don't think a lot of people understand that there's a hindrance to that, and there's a lot of caution, there's a lot of worry, and it's because we're respectful of our elders, and we understand. We all know this, that we've seen our elders in our communities get older, and we understand that when they're gone, the story is gone, that education that we really need is gone. So in this parameter of the COVID situation, it's trying to capture the story, and in a sad way, it's trying to capture the story before it's been gone, and we're losing a lot of people. And I think that was a sad thing. But when we were there, out in wherever they wanted to tell their story, we asked them to pick it. Just we'll get you there. It was a reminder of their connection to that special place that they were at, and how they told the story was beautiful. And there's a lot that I wish that could be in the film because there's so much more. And when we work with, when I myself work with other journalists and media out there, I'm very strict on them not capitalizing on those stories either, and not just taking a soundbite or stuff out of it. And so I'm glad that Deidra portrayed it in a really good way.
Do you feel that this film serves the purpose of keeping your stories and also sharing those stories?
Yeah, I don't think that there's been a film made like this before, especially from an indigenous Diné perspective. And I think that a lot of times when you see other films about the Grand Canyon, it's from a very, come to the Grand Canyon, it's the place where John Wesley Powell has gone down the canyon, and he went on treacherous rapids, and he almost didn't survive, and they lost a crew member. Like, the hell is that story? Like, that's not the story of the Grand Canyon. And I think like it's important for like indigenous voices to have a place at the table too, to have these conversations, because for so long we've been just not thought of yesteryear. We've been seen as like people who exist in John Wayne films and black and white and stuff, and even to this day we're perpetuated. Like, I literally saw the Jurassic Domination World trailer, and like in the first 7 seconds, there's like these dinosaurs, and then there's like these natives like alongside the dinosaurs, and then there's like Chris Pratt, and it's like, what is this messaging? Like, what is this like? And why am I seeing natives on horses with dinosaurs? Like, then we're going backwards, and it's like that stuff is like really like. It gets me a little angry, a little like, that's why I really feel that if there's any young Diné filmmakers or any indigenous filmmakers like that like see that as somewhat problematic, like, come on, like help us, like we need more storytellers, we need people, we need more artists to have those conversations, and I feel that for so long we weren't at the table to have those conversations, and we always were pushed down because that's the hierarchy, like that's what the media conglomeracy wants. And so it's like, now we have the technology that we can utilize. We have different instruments that we can have micro crews, and we can create our own films on a microcosm budget. And so it's like, why not? Like, what's stopping us?
Yes. Love that.
With this film premiering, do you think or expect that other Diné filmmakers are going to start kind of coming out and kind of showing their artwork through their lens too?
Yeah, I encourage all indigenous filmmakers to start creating artwork, Diné filmmakers too. Like, just, we need you guys. Like, for me personally, like, I do youth workshops. I like, that's one of the main components of why I'm a filmmaker, is because when I was young, like, the only thing that I could use at the time was the technology to create like little short stories. Like, my mom remembers it. Like, I did like little like kind of stickman like drawings, and I made a music video with that. And like, just the accomplishment of like having that power to say my own story, like it was a total blessing. And like now within the past like 15 years, like when I started at 16, we were using mini DV tapes and doing live capturing. And like, look at us now, we can instantaneously transfer quickly, we have the capabilities of using Final Cut and like Adobe and even too open source software that doesn't require subscription. Like, there's other, there's other means like that's really important, so.
And you know, a lot of times when you are in film, and I'm sure when you began, and you know, at 16, sometimes it feels like maybe I'm not doing it right, or I'm not telling the story right, or maybe like the technology barrier. When you're feeling this way, when was a moment that you felt, I have power with this camera, I have power with the work that I'm doing with storytelling? When was that moment that you realized, I'm a director?
Well, I remember this one particular moment where John McCain was chased out of the Navajo reservation because he was doing secret meetings with the council delegates. And let me tell you, like, I never knew what it was to go like viral as far as like a video. Like, that video went to like maybe 15 different countries, all trying to translate, saying that this had happened on the reservation. And like, to have that platform on a scale, and for many other countries to like kind of just like root for the natives and be like, yeah, get out of here, John McCain. Like, that was dope. Like, that was awesome. And that's what I really feel like film has power.
And with Voices of the Grand Canyon, what do you want the audience to take from it? You know, this is the story of the Grand Canyon from your voice, from your perspective. But what is it that you want people to take away from film?
I want people to take away that the land itself is sacred, but like every other place, like, should be as sacred as the Grand Canyon. Like, why is it deemed a national park? Like, that was imposed by Teddy Roosevelt just because he liked like hiking and going out to the forest and stuff. Like, that's the only reason why we have national parks to begin with, was because of an enthusiast who was liking to just hunt and be a man and all that. And I think that what I want people to take away from Voices of the Grand Canyon is that I want them to realize how much they've been robbed of the real story of what it is for Indigenous people who have always been in these lands, and to finally hear a story from the Indigenous people that are there. And like, I wanted to question the audience, like, why haven't I heard this story? Like, why hasn't this been told? And how much other stories have not been told? How much history hasn't been told? And I think like it should come down to questioning, well, who's been telling the history? And I think like once you start questioning those dynamics of the consumption of who's perpetuating the narrative, then it brings to light how many other injustices that have happened. And I think like with, like for example, Cahokia, like to my understanding, is a place where it wasn't designated as a historical place until 1966, but it has mounds, but they were pyramids. Like these were pyramids, but and they were the largest pyramids north of Mexico. And so like, how much of that history has been robbed? And it's not fair that it's been robbed of people. And I think it's important to know the historical context of how much like that has gone over the radar, or even too like the mounds themselves, like they've been just piling dirt on the stories so no one can hear them. Like they're being buried, the truth is being buried, and I think it's important to show that like this is the story, this is the historical context of it, and it really came down to colonization and the imposed killing of Indigenous people. That's why these stories aren't told, because a lot of Indigenous people have died, and I think like that should be taken into recognition.
My thoughts on the question is that I looked at the direction of the people who had, created this idea and the reasoning behind it, and that was to let people know what the true story is of the Grand Canyon, what the true voice is of the Grand Canyon. And Deidra said it's not just about, what's being portrayed right now. And, yeah, it's a really beautiful place, but there's just like the geology, the different rock formations, the different layers there. That's the same as history. There's a lot of history there, and there's a lot of history that's not being told. And that's why I think that this is a good media platform to do that. And it's not, the idea isn't just to portray the voices to the world. It's also used to help in our own communities and to educate our young people and to let them know this is what's going on and this is the history behind it, because we have to make a connection between youth and elder, and I feel like this is one way to do that.
Thank you. And this last question, as we are getting ready to wrap up, what is it that you want our viewers to maybe do, or how to support the film, or how to support, voices that are from the Grand Canyon? And I know it's no pun intended, but what do you want the audience to do after this? How can they engage with the film?
I feel that the audience should know that every step they take, an Indigenous person has stepped there before them, and that there's so much history in the landscape. Like every mountain has a story, every lake has a story, and that's what creates humans. That's what brings the humanity, is the stories and our connection to it. And I know there's like a Vine Deloria in his book, I think it was like, was it Custer died for our sins or something? Like, it's either that one or the Brett, was it, I forgot what the other book was, but he was talking about how he was driving with his grandpa, and like his grandpa would be like, oh yeah, this is the story of like this rock formation, this mesa top. This is the story here, this is the story here. And by hearing those stories, he had a personal connection to it. He knew what he was fighting for. And I think like by having and hearing these stories, like every mountain should be fought for, every piece of land should be fought for. Like they're a personification of people. Like in our Dene landscape, there's a man and a woman that lay side by side, going from Oxyson downward, and then from Zithligen downward. They sit side by side, and when you see the land as people, then it gives you power to fight for it.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Deidra and Serrano, for being here. Hope you tune in and enjoy Voices of the Grand Canyon.